Freedomizers. Welcome to the Thursday, December 11th, 2014 edition of Zone 13, the best afternoon web news show. We're broadcasting live from the studio of FreedomizerRadio.com. I'm Joanne Moretti, and my great co-host Scott Ferrarello is here with me too, and we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you very much. Our call-in number is 347-324-3704. But please hold off on calling in for a little bit. We have a lot to get to, and we can take calls later. Our chat rooms, both at Blog Talk Radio and right here at FreedomizerRadio.com, are open for you, too. At Freedomizer's home site, you can both chat and listen if you'd like. On the right-hand side of the page, when it fully loads, you'll see a little mark that says chat. Just go there and meet up with everybody. Our wonderful colleagues, Lynn and AstroTurf and Famous Anna, are in the chats putting the links, source talks, and other important information into the chats so you have them available for your own records. And thank you, ladies. You may run into several of our colleagues in the chat, as a matter of fact, so please say hi to each other when you get over there. They're much more than people who put links in the chat rooms. They're our colleagues, our research team, production team, and amazing friends. Some of them even have their own newspapers. So say hi. Today we have a big show planned, and we'll be doing some updating on some main issues, many issues as a matter of fact, like Ferguson and the NDAA and this omnibus and, of course, the torture report. But we have a lot of things to share, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, one of our colleagues, Sponge Docs, gave us an excellent report on the omnibus bill that funds our government. So we're going to be doing that, too. Before we begin the show, though, I'd like to do a short disclaimer, and that just lets the feds, FCC, NSA, DHS, anybody else, and all the alphabet agencies know that anything said on this show is solely my responsibility and not that of our wonderful sponsor, FreedomizerRadio.com, or their many valued advertisers. The disclaimer goes like this. The comments made by hosts, guests, call-ins, or chat commentators do not necessarily reflect the beliefs, opinion, viewpoints, ideals, or anything else of FreedomizerRadio.com or their many advertisers and sponsors. The show is rated PG-13, so please handle your children responsibly. We don't swear or anything, but the stuff we talk about is a little over their head. All right, well, now that we have that out of the way, let me give my great co-host, Scott Ferrarello, a proper welcome and open up his microphone. I'll get this open here. Hello, Scott. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey, how you been the last couple of days, friend?
Oh, not too bad. How about yourself?
Oh, not bad. A lot of news is going on. It's, everything is so upside down. You can't tell what's legit, what isn't legit, and there's always wrangling going on in the background. I can see like four sides to these issues that's coming up, especially today when they were voting on the rules and regulations and to end debate, all that on the omnibus bill. I don't know if it was a head fake or if it was something, but something went wrong because all of a sudden they didn't pass the motion to end debate, and the guy with the gavel had to keep slamming it, like 21 times he slammed it to quiet the minority, which was the Dems. I mean, they must have been throwing shoes at each other or something. It was really bad up there. Before we get into that, Ebola. I'm sure nobody has been paying much attention to Ebola because that guy, Ron Klain, had taken over, and he was a fixer, and, of course, the media wasn't reporting on it. But we have another Ebola case in the United States. Reuters says that an American nurse who was exposed to Ebola while volunteering in an Ebola treatment unit in Sierra Leone is going to be admitted to the National Institute of Health Clinic Center in Maryland today. Because the center is one of 35 designated as an Ebola treatment center. NIH didn't release any further information on the nurse, including whether she or he might have been exposed to the virus or the current medical condition of the patient, but the patient will be admitted for observation, they're saying. And they're going to enroll in a clinical protocol. Sounds weird, huh? Clinical protocol. Is that just the order of things that they do, or is it a lab study, or what?
It's hard to tell. They make up their own words and definitions on a regular basis.
That's a good point. That's a good point. It says the clinical studies unit is designed to provide high-level isolation capabilities and is staffed by infectious disease and critical care specialists. Yeah, so maybe it's a combination of all of it. They're using them for lab rats and they're helping them as patients, too. Hey, crude oil came down to $58 a barrel. Did you see that today?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I saw a picture of a marquee for a gas station. It said $1.89 for regular and $2.05 for unleaded or diesel, whatever. I couldn't read the sign.
I heard the shale industry doesn't think that's too fracking funny.
No, that's what we're going to talk about, my friend. You know, I don't blame people for enjoying the lower gas prices. We've been clamoring for lower gas prices. You know how much it takes a chunk out of your weekly paycheck if you have to drive like 40, 50 miles a day to work and then home. And if you get stuck in traffic, it's even more. You know, people are putting $20, $30, $40 worth of gas a day in their cars. So I can't blame them for wanting the lower prices. Excuse me. However, there is a downside to this. And it's a very serious downside at that. To make any kind of a profit, the oil companies, American oil companies, especially the shale and fracking, they have to make $64 a barrel for them to not just break even, but to get some sort of a profit, less than 3% profit. Well, now that it's down to $58 a barrel, you're going to see people starting to cap wells, to pull up rigs, send their help home, because they're not making any money. It's not worth it for them to be running all this expensive equipment and paying all this expensive help and Obamacare and unions and all of that. So you're going to have people losing their jobs. Now, once these American companies stop fracking and stop with the shale production and stop with the wells, or cut back on the wells and cut back on the help, the price of oil is not only going to go higher because there's going to be less supply, but we're again going to be at the mercy of OPEC. So although this looks like a really good thing, it could end up being a really bad thing, because not only are we going to be back at the mercy of OPEC, but, you know, Obama is not giving permits on public land, so this is all private companies and private people that are going to in trouble right now. There's nobody on the public lands, or there are, but he's not renewing the permits. OPEC is flipping out because all their economies are shrinking fast. Even Russia and Saudi Arabia, everybody that's an oil-producing company is freaking out. But they're going to be okay because they're not going to cut back. They're state-run. They're not private companies. Private companies will lay off. State-run companies will just charge the taxpayers more money and keep the help on. So that puts them at a bigger advantage than the United States. And also, Obama is proposing to raise the gas tax. Now, you know about, what is it, like 38 cents on a dollar a gallon. It's like 38%, so 38 cents on the dollar. If he raises it up to, say, 45 cents on the dollar, and you know those prices are going back up, then when they go back up, he's not going to reduce that tax. So you're still going to be paying 45 cents on the dollar. 90 cents on $2, you know, it goes that way. So we're in trouble. And the last time we had one of these instances, it was the prelude to the crash of our economy. You know, I mean, I know it sounds rough, but if a company is not going to make a profit, they're not in there for a social event. You know, they're not a social experiment. They are in it to make profit. Their shareholders and investors are in it to make profit. If there's no profit, there's no company. And if there's no company, there's no product. So we could be seeing gas lines again. Like I said, I know right now, enjoy it while you have it. And while the gas is down to $1.89, you might want to consider stashing some.
Well, if there was, crude ready for refinement, there would be no problem. But, President...
What do you mean?
They haven't had regular crude oil ready for refinement at all. I mean, he's been cutting all the permits and everything for the last 6 years. I mean, they're not drilling anymore, you know. It's all this fracking shale stuff.
Right. Yeah, well, there's so much oil beneath the ground, and we're just being prevented from getting it on public land with the lack of permitting. But even still, yeah, we do need refining capability, that's for sure.
They're just doing this basically to crush the Russian economy, you know.
Yeah, that too. Russia's not liking it one bit. As a matter of fact, the Russian ruble fell to 55 cents on the dollar today.
Right.
Versus the dollar. So they're
That's
not liking
huge.
it. It is huge. It
and
is
plus
very huge.
NATO
Right.
is moving troops towards, you know, Moscow every day.
That's true too. You know, that before we get any further with that, I'm glad you're talking about Russia, because I'd like to remind people what happened in the Ukraine and where this all began. A long time ago, George Soros had an orange revolution in the Ukraine. He was trying to turn the Ukraine into a socialist utopia. He failed, but he never gave up. So with the help of his Renaissance Foundation and his Open Society and all the big donors he has, as well as USAID, who Hillary Clinton has had a huge hand in all these years, and it's involved with the Clinton Global Initiative too, they overthrew the elected government of the Ukraine. You remember they had a president, and they overthrew him. So then Putin got mad. Putin was doing business with him, and they had a shared economy. So now that the Soros revolution this time was successful, and they did overthrow the government, of course Putin got mad. But the way that the United States media is portraying it is like, here's this government, and they're trying to be a democracy, and Putin's getting in the way. No, they're not trying to be a democracy. They didn't have an election. They were booted out of office, just run out of town. And some of the same players from Soros' original Renaissance, his Orange Revolution, are now key players in this new government. And Obama's up to his ears in it.
That must be pretty deep.
Yeah, it is. So when everybody's thinking that, Russia, Putin's a bad guy. Putin was head of the KGB. So, but, the thing about Putin is Putin loves Russia. I wish our president loved our country as much as...
He's Santa Claus compared to the creep we have,
Unbelievable.
I mean, I tell you, they told, I think it was Albert Pike or someone predicted that one day the countries would be flipped and America would become Russia and Russia would become America. And it's happening.
It is happening. And, Putin's got a higher approval rating than anybody in the United States.
Oh, big time. Well, hey, if you want to go there, let's talk, look at Syria. Syria had an 85% turnout on their last election, and 75% went with Assad.
Yeah.
So they don't tell you that either, you see. They
Yeah,
don't
we're
have
in the
voting
process.
fraud machines either, though, They don't have, the Democratic
That's another thing.
voter
That's
fraud.
another thing. Obama's trying to overthrow Syria. He's overthrowing Venezuela. He overthrew Egypt. Well, not personally Obama, but with Obama's help and all those Soros organizers and Acorn International. And you all saw the protests and the Guy Fawkes masks and the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is Obama's favorite group.
Yep.
Well, he overthrew Mubarak. Now, even though Mubarak was a bad guy, all the stuff that was going on over there didn't happen. However, Mubarak was a bad guy. But the people were sucked in by the organizers and the Muslim Brotherhood. Once they realized that this wasn't really a revolution, or the revolution had gotten hijacked by the radicals, they overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood. That was the smartest thing they've done. But, this is the same stuff that they've been doing right along. They did it in El Salvador. They did it in they're doing it in Venezuela now, as we speak. They did it in Ukraine. Libya.
Iraq.
all these places, and it's the globalists. They want a one-world government, and it's true. I always say, nah, that the Hoogie Boogies and the Illuminatis and the globalists and all that. Well, I'm starting to rethink this. I'm still thinking the Illuminati is Hoogie Boogie, and they're a bunch of weirdos at some frat party giving their little secret handshakes, and, the Jay-Z's and the Beyonce crew. And all those.
See, that's the phony end of it, okay? Those people just pretend like they're members, but they're not. They're just Satan-worshiping losers. But there's a real sect of it. And these people, you don't get in because you're a celebrity or whatever. You're born into it. You got to be a part of the bloodline.
So those are just the little marionettes, right? The
right.
Little puppets.
It's like when the rumor of the New World Order first came out. Guess what they did? They had an NWO wrestling tag team on the WWE. You make something serious ridiculous, so people just blow it off as completely ridiculous. It's an old Sal Alinsky routine. It's just like when everybody brings up the fact that Obama was born in Kenya. Okay, he comes out and makes jokes about not being born in America, you see.
He just joked again about it. He said, there's people in this country who think I'm an illegal alien.
Of course, and that's because he is. And when you don't have the truth on your side, you've got to use these other tactics.
Yeah.
It's like liars always calling other people liars.
Well, I'll tell you. You're right. I think it is. I think, the one end is just the court jesters and the little parade ones. But other than that, I don't know.
Of course, they want a one world. I mean, this isn't a secret. They all write in their books about it. You got George H.W. Bush on 9/11, 1991 or something, saying it. I mean, they're all talking. Henry Kissinger talks about it all the time. And the last time, he says it at least once a week about the New World Order.
Yeah, he does. He came out again not that long ago. America needs a New World Order, and
usher it in. And it sure looks that way, doesn't it?
Well, he said, we are the ones we've been waiting for, and Oprah said he is the one.
Yeah.
And, they know. They have their own language. They're not their own language, but they know their own buzzwords that they are trained to listen for. And once they get those words and they hear them, those are all go signals.
That's right.
We're going to get back to more of this. This is just, I'm just really upset right now with the way that everything is going on here, because they're purposely trying to confuse us. Especially with our economy, with our foreign policy, with, this, even the protests, the Ferguson Berkeley, once they veered off the street and into Macy's and into Apple, everybody should have figured out that was now an anti-capitalist march. It wasn't for Gunner, and it wasn't for Mike Brown, and it's not for Joe Schmo from Idaho, the next person that they decide to put up as the poster child. This is all about anti-capitalism, about an agenda. But all those anti-capitalists, they are walking around in their Birkenstock shoes and their Arapistoli sweatshirts, and they're holding on to their iPhones, and marching.
They don't dress
marching for miles. If anything, they're getting good exercise. It's like going to a yoga class. But the organizers know what's going on. I'm sure that the people in those crowds are probably sincere and probably do think that they're marching for justice. But the people like Lisa Fethian and the Acorns and the NAACP and the Al Sharptons, they all know the real agenda. They know what the real deal is. And they don't realize that they are just no more than just little puppets for the agenda. Now, in Berkeley is right near Oakland, of course, and that's where the Occupy Black Bloc is located, in Oakland. That's where their headquarters is. These people are running around smashing capitalistic things. I can even understand the Occupy Wall Street with the banks. But why are you going after little stores like the meat market and, the mom and pop variety store and all that stuff? I have a story here from BCN. A protest march through 3 East Bay cities devolved into a burglary and robbery spree in Emeryville Tuesday night after Berkeley police arrested 6 people and the California Highway Patrol arrested 13 people blocking a highway in Oakland. CHP officers used less lethal munitions to clear the crowds who blocked State Highway 24 after crossing into Oakland at about 9:30 p.m. I'm surprised these kids haven't been creamed by traffic. But the cops, instead of stopping the protesters from going into the highway, they're stopping the traffic on the highway to have these people avoid hitting the protesters. A protest is a protest, but when you're interfering with things like a woman having a baby and she's stuck in traffic and they have to bring in special equipment and they have to walk her on a gurney through piles of cars to get back to their ambulance, then it's not fun anymore. But it says after marching through Oakland, protesters went up to San Pablo Avenue, where police say businesses, including a Pack and Save, 7-Eleven, and a CVS were vandalized and looted. You know that 7-Eleven is owned by black people, by the way? Don't they matter? The Tuesday was the 4th in as many days, and the protests sadly quickly grew out of hand, with police having to deploy tear gas in the early evening and protesters hurling objects at the officer. They were throwing M80s at him and stuff. What part of this has anything to do with Michael Brown or Eric Garner? Nothing. This isn't about the cops. If it wasn't Mike Brown, it would be the next one. We already told you. Ferguson had an urban renewal plan already voted on and adopted by the city council, who are all, of course, leftists. And the governor, Nixon, he's a leftist. And he even come out and said the reason I didn't deploy the National Guard was because I didn't want another Kent state. Can you imagine that? He makes it sound like they're going to come in like Pancho Villa came to town with the 6 guns blazing. Just shooting up the town. That's not what they're going to do.
He's a lowlife. Another lowlife politician.
Yeah, the mayor of Ferguson couldn't get a hold of him, and the lieutenant governor couldn't get a hold of him, but Valerie Jarrett and Eric Holder sure did. They were on the phone all night with him. I call it opening night because...
I tell you what, if Valerie Jarrett would have gave the thumbs up, he would have ordered them to massacre the whole bunch. Look at Waco, Texas or something. There's no stand down, something like that. They didn't even use the National Guard. They used the ATF and stuff like that. And even when they don't want to use their own troops, they just outsource it to Blackwater. That's what they did in Katrina when they went door to door confiscating guns. That's who slammed that little old lady to the ground and stole and took her little handgun.
Yeah, absolutely. So before anybody starts thinking that, this is all about the black people and the cops are shooting at them, and more white people were killed by police than black people, like threefold.
Wow.
Yeah, and if this is a police brutality situation, then it's police brutality on everybody. This government is so intent on dividing us on race or gender or sexual preference or religion or whatever other way they can divide us on. But this black-white thing is really bad. We were all right. We were getting along just fine. We didn't have this craziness. But as soon as you get these race pimps in there and the leftists who will adopt any subject, like I said, if it wasn't Mike Brown, it would have been somebody else. There's a shooting in Ferguson every day. They shoot at the cops shoot at the people. Look at Chicago. The place is a cesspool. You never hear anything coming out of there. They didn't pull Michael Brown out of there, did they? Or the last person that got shot? Of course not, because it's not. Chicago is a hub where all these leftists are, so they're not going to do it in their own backyard. But they did have a convenient location already set up. That entire 4.5-mile corridor on West Florissant was already scheduled to be raised. So, you know, it's a lot easier to bulldoze a pile of rubble than it is to disassemble a building before you're replacing it. And they were even looking for funding. What a coincidence. Obama's going to give them $250 million. Billion, not million.
Yeah. Another way to funnel money. So, and you know, when people are in poverty and they don't have jobs and whatnot, they're already upset. It doesn't take much to light a fire, you know, and to get rioting.
Especially if you have people up there like Lisa Fethian, who was there since August.
Right. And Sharpton. And
Eric Holder, and his little flunkies from the DOJ who are organizing up there, and Amnesty International, which is the UN. You know, they were there on the ground organizing. And all the little offshoot, they don't call themselves ACORN anymore because they were voted to defund ACORN. So everybody just changed their names, pulled out the tin cup, and they're back in business. This is insanity, and we keep falling for it, and we have to put a stop to it. You don't hate black people. Black people don't hate you. You know, and what about the Asians and the Hispanics? Why aren't we having everybody? Why does nobody ever fight with the Asians? Because they're not convenient. This is all baloney, guys. We don't have a beef with each other. You know, nobody gets to choose the color of their skin. They're even saying the song White Christmas is racist. Have they ever heard the lyrics? It's about snow. Do you think you have any control over the color of snow now? Why are we fighting over stupid things we have no control over? Did anybody get to choose their race? Because nobody asked me. I can't believe this. I can't believe people fall for this every time. It's making me really upset. You know, especially with people with blended families. You know, what do? You say, okay, I like that kid, but I don't like that one. I like the little black one, but I don't like the little white one, and I don't like that little Middle Eastern one there, a little Lebanese kid. That one's got an attitude. You know, I mean, what are you supposed to say here? You can't live like that. We can't live like that, and this country cannot survive if we're going to be this divided over something that none of us had any control over to start with. You know, slavery's gone. I never had a slave. They never were a slave. Okay, these people were trying to bring up stuff from 100 years ago. Hello, it's 2014, guys.
See,
we got a lot going on around us. We can't be worrying about this stuff right now.
This country is too peaceful, so they have to create division. They have to open the borders and let in all sorts of, you know, criminals. They have to actually release thousands and thousands of, you know, criminals out of prisons.
Right.
I mean, that's what they're doing. There's not enough chaos in this country, so they have to create some.
And that's the key right there, chaos.
How are they going to justify their billion-dollar budgets and whatnot for all their militarized police and DHS, TSA, and NSA, you know, encroachment?
Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, the whole Waco thing. I mean, right at that time, you know, it was funny. They were having a discussion about, is the ATF really necessary? Maybe they should be defunded. And all of a sudden, big bad David Koresh.
No, please, him.
I mean, it was a joke.
Yeah. That is a joke.
And, David, you know, they burned a bunch of kids alive on TV. You know, I mean, Janet Reno was one of the biggest sickos on the planet, and I mean,
those people had gone in and out of town multiple times to get supplies and, you know, go to the general store and stuff. They couldn't have just grabbed them off the street then.
Of course they could have, but you see that wouldn't have made it on TV. That wouldn't have showed the need for the and soon after that, the ATF was fully funded. They even got a few extra bucks. So it was just, you know, it was that's pure vintage problem reaction solution at work.
Yep, and the Clintons were in the White House then too.
Oh yes, they were.
Yep, and the same with that Elian Gonzalez too. And Eric Holder was the Deputy Attorney General. So this isn't anything different or new. This is just a continuation of the same thing. And
Well,
we
it
keep
works.
falling for it. It does
It
work.
works.
Very effective. That's our
You know?
problem. We don't take that away from them.
It's just like whenever the government does something that is totally BS and unnecessary, they just whip out the 9/11 Bin Laden name. Oh, we're going to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. How come? 9/11. We're gonna allow torture. Why? 9/11. We're going to have to create a Department of Homeland Security. Why? 9/11. We're going to have to create a TSA. How come? 9/11. I mean, this has been milked for what now? 12 years? So whenever they have something that they want to push through, Patriot Act, NDAA, you ask them, why do you have to do this? The answer is always the same. Bin Laden, 9/11. And there's people who suck it up. And if you don't go along with it, oh, you're a traitor. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, no, there's a difference, big difference. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought up the NDAA, because Justin Amash said it was the most egregious thing he's ever encountered. The NDAA, unlimited access to communications of every American. Matter of fact, Paul Joseph Watson wrote an article about it. He says, according to the Congressman Justin Amash, Congress just passed a bill which grants the government and law enforcement unlimited access to the communications of every American. When the Michigan lawmaker discovered that the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2015 had been amended with a provision that authorizes the acquisition, retention, and dissemination of all communications data from U.S. citizens, he desperately attempted to organize a roll call vote on the bill. However, the legislation was passed yesterday, 325 to 100, by way of a voice vote, a green light for what Amash describes as one of the most egregious sections of law I have encountered during my entire time as a representative. The bill allows private communications of Americans to be scooped up without a court order and then transferred to law enforcement for criminal investigation. So they can just listen into our phone call, and if they decide they think that there's something that you and I might have said that could possibly be illegal, or they could twist to be illegal, they're going to call up the local cops.
Well,
say,
they've
hey,
been doing, yeah, but they've been doing that anyway forever. I mean, now they're just, making it official, but they've been doing that forever. The real bad thing about that NDAA is the indefinite detention without being charged with a crime, not having access to a phone to call, a lawyer or your family, and just being disappeared for eternity, like they did in 1970s Russia, Soviet Union.
And another thing, too, the courts are doing. The courts are refusing people standing. Well, if you're scooped up off the street, don't you think you can prove damage? So this is just an orchestrated attack against the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the American people, and it's coming from within. Now, this is the last of this old Congress, thank goodness. All of this can change. Every bit of it can change. But we got to change from the top to the middle to the bottom. Everybody, everything. And, we're doing a pretty good job, actually. In 2010, we got rid of a lot of people. In 2012, we got rid of a lot of people who were opposed to the Tea Party. Look at Eric Cantor. This year, this time.
Guy.
Well, I found out he was a mole.
The people at the top are the same. John Boner, Mitch McConnell, they're ringers. They get in no matter what.
Kind of up in the air on Boehner, and I'm going to tell you about that in a second. But Boehner is either something's very wrong or something is very right, and this is all a chess game.
A liar.
Well, this is all a chess game.
Hangs out with Joy Behar at parties and tells her he's Obama's best friend. I tend to believe that. He's probably drunk. He's telling her the truth. It's not nothing we don't know, but... Yeah,
well, something's not right there with him. So they either got him on a string, he's being blackmailed, or he is a very good chess and poker player.
He's not.
And, well, I don't know. I think today what I witnessed was they were supposed to agree on this vote. They brought it up, and all of a sudden it didn't pass.
Yeah.
The Republicans weren't yelling at each other, but the Democrats were practically throwing shoes at each other. They were flipping out. So something happened that upset those Democrats that bad.
What happened was the Teamsters Union said they didn't like it. That's what happened.
I don't know.
Jimmy Hoffa Jr. came out and said, kill the bill. And right after he said that, all of a sudden, all these Democrats didn't like it anymore. I mean, come on, man. He's greasing their, the Teamsters Union's greasing half of their pockets.
Well, friend Denise wrote a pretty good article about the omnibus. And I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I want to bring up some very important things that she put into this. She writes, there's likely much more included in the $1.1 trillion spending bill. However, below I'll demonstrate some of the items, as some of it is just stupid. She writes, the reading below is good exercise. The items included are likely to change while the bill is in committee, so the numbers and earmarks are dynamic in nature. She says the $1.01 trillion spending bill unveiled late Tuesday will keep most of the federal government funded through next September, and it's packed with hundreds of policy instructions, known on Capitol Hill as riders, that will upset or excite Democrats, Republicans, and various special interest groups. So what's in the bill? We've sifted through the legislation, consulted supporting documents from Democratic and Republican aides, and called out some of the most notable and controversial elements. She says if you want to review the detailed report on all 12 parts, click a link that she put there. She says this is a fluid report and will be updated. Abortion. The bill once again bans using federal funding to perform most abortions, blocks the use of local and federal funding for abortions in the District of Columbia, and blocks the use of federal dollars for abortion for federal prisons. Republicans say that there's also new language directing the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that consumers shopping for health care coverage on the federal exchange can tell whether a plan covers abortion services. That's actually a pretty good thing, because you don't want to, a lot of religious groups would not buy their plan if it included abortion services, not for themselves or anyone else. The Affordable Care Act, that's the Obamacare bill. The law is still funded, but there's no new money in it. There's also no new ACA-related funding for the Internal Revenue Service and the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, the two agencies most responsible for implementing the law. The bill would also cut the budget of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, what Republicans called the death panel, by $10 million. It didn't take it out, but they cut the budget for that. So you're only going to be half dead, I guess. Afghanistan. Congress withholds funding for the Afghan government until certain conditions are met. Amtrak, the nation's rail passenger service, earns $1.39 billion, the same amount it currently receives. The rail service carries passengers through 46 states and hit an all-time high of 31.6 million passengers during the last year. So they didn't increase that money. Campaign finance, the bill would dramatically expand the amount of money that wealthy political donors could inject into the national parties, drastically undercutting the 2002 landmark McCain-Feingold campaign finance overhaul. So they just got rid of that. A donor who gave the maximum $32,000 for this year to the DNC or Republican National Committee would be able to donate $291,600. So from $32,000 to $291,000, almost $300,000. That's a 3,000% increase. The Center for Disease Control, the agency would get more than $6.9 billion. That's an increase of about $42.7 million, and that's for fighting diseases. Clean Water Act, this is a win, because the spending bill blocks the Environmental Protection Agency from applying the law to certain farm ponds and irrigation ditches. So if it's on your private property, the EPA doesn't have any control over it unless it affects the public waterways. Remember the guy that built a little pond in his yard and put some fish and some ducks in there for his little kid? And then they were fining him like $35,000 a day because it's a waterway and he didn't, even though he had permits. Dodd-Frank. Democrats agreed to make some of the biggest changes yet to the 2010 financial regulatory reforms. And it says a deal sought by Republicans. The bill would reverse Dodd-Frank requirements that banks push out some of derivatives trading into separate entities not backed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That's very important, ladies and gentlemen, because right now, derivatives are a license to kill. Soros told us that. They have the biggest bubble, and the banks are freaking out over this because they wanted to be able to deal in all these derivatives, short and sell everything, and if they make a profit, they get to keep the profit. But if they lose money, they get to charge the taxpayers for the loss from the FDIC. It was explained to me, if I go into, say, Las Vegas and place a sports bet for $1 million on the New England Patriots, if the Patriots win, I get the winnings, and of course you get your money plus a amount for winning. I get to keep that. But if I lose that $1 million, I get to say to the taxpayers, you got to give me $1 million because I lost it on this bet. That's how that works. Derivatives really are a license to kill. So this actually is a good thing in that. Ebola.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, it says key test vote on spending bill passes by 2 votes at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you. I didn't see that last one. It's got $5.4 billion for Ebola, and that's provided across several agencies to combat the spread of the disease in the United States and around the world. So you're not just going to stop it here. They're just going to bring it, they said if they don't stop it there, they'll bring everybody here and stop it here. Use your money. They're getting your money one way or another, folks.
So this is just money created out of thin air, which will be added into the pool, which will just devalue the dollar even more and raise inflation everywhere else.
They got a nice little vague one here on Egypt. It said the beleaguered country gets $1.3 billion in military aid and $150 million in economic aid, but the money is subject to democracy and human rights conditions. But it doesn't say what those conditions are, so they can write those as they go along. If they don't like something that Egypt's doing, well, then they'll just hold back that money. Embassies are funded. Environmental Protection Agency. The agency gets $8.1 billion. That's down $60 million from the last year. From the last fiscal year that they had a budget, actually, because we've been running on CRs. So it's been slashed by $2.2 billion, or 21%. And those cuts mean the EPA will have to reduce its staffing to the lowest levels. Eric Cantor, he was a mole, right? And I'm glad the people got rid of him. So, well, kind of. The former House Majority Leader stunned the political world by losing a GOP primary last year. But Congress agreed to provide $12.6 million for his signature legislative achievement, the Gabriella Miller Kids First Act, which authorizes new federally funded pediatric research. The bill was paid for by slashing federal funding for political conventions. Okay, I don't have a problem with slashing the funding for political conventions. They should be able to fund their own convention. However, I do have a problem with this pediatric research. What does that mean? It's too vague. Are they going to kidnap more kids like Justina Pelletier and those other 2 little kids down in Tennessee?
Hey, you said Eric Cantor was a mole. Who is he a mole for? I mean, the guy's a troll. He's no different than John Boehner. I mean, those 2 are like Batman and Robin in there. So who is he a mole for exactly?
Well, he's pretty responsible for all the caving that the Republicans have been doing, and he was telling everybody, it's in our best interest and don't upset the apple carts, and that's why he got thrown out, because he wasn't, he wasn't put there to capitulate to the left. He was put there to do his job and work for the people of the United States, not left, right, or otherwise. But instead, it's always left or right. And he was more on the left than the right. And he was,
Well,
yeah, he was.
That's what all the rhinos are.
Exactly, he was a rhino.
All the rhinos are more like Nancy Pelosi than they are, Craig out of here or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that he was carrying secrets back and forth. You know, it was told to me that he was a mole, and I know what a mole is, so I'm thinking, you know, if there was negotiations going on, he just marched straight across the aisle and told them everything that was said in the meeting, and, you know, he was trying to make friends, and, you know, he was
John
whatever.
McCain's the biggest mole there is. You know? I mean, he's legendary at it. When you get censored by your own state because you're too much like a Democrat, I mean, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. This immigration thing is bothering me in the bill, too. It says the bill only funds the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees most immigration policy until February. But negotiators gave new money for immigration programs at other federal agencies. There's $948 million for the Department of Health and Human Services Unaccompanied Children program, an $80 million increase. This program provides health and education services for the young migrants. The department also gets $14 million to help school districts absorbing the new immigration students. And the State Department would get $260 million to assist Central American countries from where the immigrant children are coming. So they put money in there to give to Central American countries, $260 million. And it doesn't say what this assistance is. Is it to assist them to get here? Assist them to keep them there?
Yeah, bus rides and airplane tickets.
Yeah.
God.
Why are we giving money to Central America? You know, if we're supporting their people here, why are we giving them money? They should be giving us money. Israel, there's a $3.1 billion in total aid for the country, plus $619.8 million in defense. Joe Biden, the legislation once again enacts a pay freeze for the vice president and senior political appointees. That's fine. Libya, they're not going to receive any money until the Secretary of State confirms the country's cooperating, but then they're going to give them a bunch. Jordan, the Arab Kingdom, would receive $1 billion in economic and military aid in addition to the U.S. humanitarian aid for millions of Syrian refugees. You know, we're sending a lot of money overseas here, folks. Light bulbs are in there. That bill, the bill, prohibits new standards that would ban the use of cheaper, less energy-efficient bulbs. The proposal was first introduced and set in motion by the Bush administration, but the Obama White House allowed the change to continue anyhow, despite sustained consumer demand. So he didn't care what you want, what kind of light bulbs you want. Marijuana, of course, they're going to be prohibited from legalizing marijuana for much of the coming year, but not the whole year. Metro rail's in there. Military pay and perks, they're going to receive a 1% pay increase next year, but inflation is, what, 7%, 9%? What's it gone up now?
Does nothing.
Yeah, we're funding...
Shorts. You know, if I was the GOP, I'd take all the money away from immigration, all the money away from the Department of Homeland Security, all the money away from TSA, you know, and all these organizations. I'd give it to the veterans.
Yeah. Well, DHS is now all of those agencies that you just mentioned combined, TSA and FBI and all of them. They're all fall under DHS, and that's run by the DOJ, including immigration and everything else.
You know how many bad guys the TSA have found in the last 10 years? 0. Talk about flushing money down the toilet. Well,
that makes DHS illegal, by the way, if anybody would like to get into some of that. If
of course they are.
The Constitution says that Congress is specifically in control of immigration. So why now is immigration being run by DHS, who is run by the Department of Justice, which is part of the executive branch, not the legislative branch? So right there, you have a constitutional crisis, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
They don't run immigration, although that they've been running it. You know, right now, our Constitution is being trampled, and you know, we may not ever be able to get it back at this rate.
They have to do something with their time, and it sure isn't securing the homeland. Okay, you know, just like everything else they do, it's the opposite of what they say they do. If it's homeland security, it's open the borders and let's help everybody in.
What part of the homeland is Central America?
Yeah. Well, it's North American Union now.
Right.
One big happy family.
And that takes away the immigration control from Congress. Again, same thing. That's a constitutional crisis. People don't see this. You know, some people haven't even read the Constitution. Do you know that? 17 pages.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it, you know.
They can watch TV for 2 hours. 17 pages will take you 20 minutes if you're a slow reader.
Most of the people in D.C. haven't read it. I mean, you know.
This is true.
Plus, it's illegal to hand out. You can't even hand out copies of the Constitution in most places in the United States. They'll arrest you.
On a public street on Constitution Day, those kids got arrested.
Right.
And in a public university. They were suspended for handing out constitutions on Constitution Day.
That's the last thing they want to teach. That might give you some power.
Yeah, well, you could stand on that.
Masters.
You could stand on that university veranda and hold an ISIS flag. No one says a word to you. You hand somebody a constitution, and they treat you like you're America's most wanted.
Right, and they lose their minds. Well, they even had a video where they were taping police pulling over a car, and the cops are looking in the trunk, and you would have thought that they found, you know, a 15-year-old girl tied up in the back of the trunk, you know, with 40 pounds of heroin in it. You know what it was?
What?
It was some Tea Party memorabilia in the Constitution. They were freaking out like it was just, you know, Nazi propaganda from the 20s.
Yeah, domestic terrorists. Meanwhile, the Tea Party has been right all along. They were right about the Obamacare. They were right about the taxes. They were right about the Constitution. No wonder everybody's freaking out. Even the Republicans are trying to get rid of the Tea Party.
You know,
now, Gruber proved it himself that the Tea Party was right.
Michelle Bachmann was right the whole time as well, and she's been nothing but ridiculed, as well as Sarah Palin, who said there was going to be death panels. They made fun of her for saying it. And, you know, it's right in that you just know what's going to happen when you add in millions and millions of people and take away control from doctors and cut their pay and everything else. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out it's going to create a shortage of doctors, and it's going to overwhelm the system. So there's going to have to be rationing because there's only so much to go around.
And it's going to put insurance companies out of business, so there won't be any insurance companies.
Well,
bingo, there you have, single payer. Then the taxpayers end up with it.
You know, except for the huge insurance companies that wrote the bill in the first place, which gets subsidies and gets bailed out when they get into trouble. You know, they're going to be insurance companies too big to fail.
Gruber told us that too.
Yep.
Gruber told us that too. He said that if we know that the insurance companies are not going to be able to take on these extra risks and make any money, so they're not going to be on board with it. So we have to put something in there for them to know that if they lose money, that we'll pick up the difference, at least initially.
You know, you can say what you want about right-wingers, but they were freaking out over this thing. They knew it was just like Hillary Care. They were out there protesting. They were ringing phones off the hook. That's why not one Republican voted for it. They had to sneak it in there, and then they had to blackmail one of the judges just so he wouldn't rule it unconstitutional. And then Gruber comes out, you know, spiking the football like he did something really great, talking about what idiots the voters were. Well, the Democratic voters, you bet. They are idiots. Yeah. They believed you.
Yeah, well, what I got out of Gruber was, suckers, you fell for it. We put one over on you, you stupid voters. We are much smarter than you. We are elitists. We're glib. Remember that word, glib?
But that's all to the left, though, right? Because the right all knew what a piece of crap it was, and they didn't want it.
Right.
I mean, that's why they had to ram it down their throats.
I mean, literally ram it. You remember the little old ladies at the town hall and the SEIU people coming in the purple shirts and slapping them around, and they bit off one little old man's finger. They were beating up little old ladies. They beat up that black guy because he was selling Gadsden flags. He was just minding his business out there. He wasn't even at the meeting. He was just selling flags because he was a smart little capitalist, and he went where the crowd was and brought a product that the crowd would like.
And the union thugs were doing that as well. And then when it passes, they find out that they're not going to be exempt from it. And, oh, boy, they just freaked out then. Now it's a terrible thing.
One Democrat, Steve Lynch from Massachusetts, he's probably the last old-school Dem up there now. There isn't anymore. He did not vote for the ACA. He said, unlike my counterparts, I did read it. He said, I have union members beating down my door demanding I repeal this. They got snookered. Yeah, they did.
I won't call it the ACA. That's just the opposite name of what it is, like they name everything else. It's an Unaffordable Care Act.
That's right. It is.
It's not affordable. It doesn't give you any care,
Yeah, and it's all an act.
Yeah, and it's all an act, right, exactly.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But we knew it, and the Tea Party knew it. But they were vilified. You know why they were vilified? Because the left wanted it. The left wants the single payer. They're going to, even if Gruber said, well, we can't tell people that it's a tax on them, but we can tell them that it's a tax on those evil insurance companies. And they'll go for it.
And the insurance companies wrote it. I mean, they love it.
Yeah, but not only that, the insurance companies are going to pass that on to you. What do you think, they're going to suck and eat up the difference?
That's right. Plus, they have guaranteed amount of customers. They have a guaranteed maximum number of customers. So there's no free market capitalism. There's no, competition.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Rockefeller said, competition is a sin.
And, you're right about the big insurance companies, too, because they will end up being the government agency that is used as a clearinghouse because they're already in that business. So they'll just be absorbed by the federal government, the last ones standing. The rest of them are going out of business. That is the plan. Bonnie Frank told us the plan. They all told us the plan, actually. We heard them, but we didn't listen. And everybody thought, because they sold it, oh, you're going to get something for nothing, and your prices are going down. And, if you wanted a policy that covered uninsured people, why didn't you just come up with a policy that covered uninsured people and leave the rest of the people alone? Because it wasn't about insuring people. It was about taking control of 1/6 of the United States economy, which is health care. It was about control and power. It was never about... There's more people uninsured now with this stupid bill than were before we got the bill. We didn't have bodies in the streets, but it was a crisis. It was in a hurry. We had to do it. You can't even read it because it's that important. It's like the whole country's going to die if we don't do it today. You're all going to be dead. Your kids are going to be dead, your family, everything. We need it now. People fell for that.
Yeah, that was
they didn't need it then. They don't need it now.
That was the crown jewel of socialism. That's why that was the very first thing he went for.
That's right.
He had Nutsy Pelosi in there, and they controlled both houses. It was just a rubber stamp.
Now they're doing it with immigration. Now, it's important. Yeah, we got dead bodies all over Mexico and halfway up to America, and, everybody's dying. You got to do it now. We need it now. No, they don't. But they're going to tell you they do. It's ridiculous. And the same thing with this Ferguson thing. What do you think? This is about Eric Garner? No. Michael Brown? No. Of course not. No, it isn't.
We went from the melting pot to the melting stool.
This is a way to control the local police departments. They're socializing our local police. They can't socialize the sheriffs yet because those are elected officials.
Well, half of them go to FBI training, so they're being brainwashed regardless.
Yeah, well, what
free
business?
FBI training. Did you know that?
Yeah. Well, what business does the federal government having any say in a local crime issue? It was proven that it was not a civil rights violation. to be totally honest, the kid attacked the cop after he attacked the store owner. Okay? He wasn't jumping that cop and fighting him for his gun to just make off with the gun. He was going to kill that cop, and anybody who doesn't think so is a fool.
But this is something that happens every 20 seconds in America.
That's right. If it wasn't Michael Brown, it would have been the next one.
It was the right timing. It was right before that verdict came down in New York. They wanted to start a huge riot, and look, it fizzled out basically.
Yeah, well, now it's morphed. Now it's morphed into violent Black Bloc Occupy protests. The black people are even saying white people shouldn't even be in these protests. But if you look at those protests, I think it's probably like 100 to 1, white to black.
Well, you just wait until some of the black people figure out that they're being used by these, and some already are. I mean, there's one black woman who, her son or something got killed by a cop, and she came right out and said, "Don't even come here, Sharpton. I don't want to see your race-baiting face."
Yeah, I know that.
So bravo to her,
There was another black kid killed by a cop in Chicago the other night.
This happens all the time. And
the mother,
this is called life.
Yeah.
Chances are, if you're not committing a crime, and you stay away from the cops, you're gonna be all right. But I wouldn't call them if my hair was on fire and my house was burning down. But that's just me, because I have found that you call them when you have a crisis, not when you need one. And I've called them before because I had a crisis, and they made it 20 times worse. But that's just my experience.
Yeah, and, those experiences happen every day, but so do the other experiences, too. There's another side to that coin, and it's a very rare occasion that, it's the bad side. The cops I know are awesome people. I hang around with some of them, and they're very much patriots, and they would never do these type of things. They don't give a damn what color you are. But let me tell you something. If you are going to start punching them in the face and trying to take their gun, there's going to be a problem. Just don't do that, and you'll be fine. If there's a problem, you just say, we'll handle it. You're standing there fighting with them, you're not going to win. So use your head. But that doesn't happen either, and everybody wants to be so down on the cops. Well, yeah, there's good and bad cops. And one cop isn't a reflection on all the rest of them. Or if that were the case, then every one of those black people is Michael Brown. And you can't trust them because they'll all go for your gun. Does that make sense? Or every one of those white people burning down those stores in Berkeley are the same exact. So don't let them in your store because they might burn the place down. Like Scott just said, this is life, ladies and gentlemen. There are violent people and there are nice people, and you have to learn to sort through them. But you can't just paint them all with a broad brush. That's crazy.
I want to know where the community from India is. They're the ones that should be protesting. That poor guy that owned that store that Michael Brown strong-armed those cigarellos off of.
Yeah.
Not only did he get, stolen and have his business put a big target on it, but they came back later and just destroyed it.
Yeah. I saw people falling into the trap, too. They said, oh, so what, he's a Muslim. No, he's Indian. You don't even know the difference. He's not a Muslim.
I wouldn't say that. That's not right.
No.
I'm definitely
but like I said, I've seen it.
I'm not a fan of Islam by any...
Me either.
But you know what? What's right is right, and this guy wasn't doing anything wrong. He was trying
making
to
honest money.
Make honest money, and to have his business trashed because he didn't, allow some 7-foot-tall, 800-pound, monster just steal from him. He stood up to the guy.
He did stand up to him too, didn't he? He tried to stop him.
And he was
half his size.
He was getting tossed around like he was 5 years old.
Like a stuffed animal. Yeah, and that poor guy, what was he doing? He was standing there working, making honest money, earning his day's pay, and providing a service for the neighborhood, And what did he get for it? His store got burnt down anyhow. Hey, we have a caller with their hand raised. I recognize this number, so I'm going to open up this microphone and see if I'm right. 318, you're live.
Hey, it's me. Can you hear me okay on the speakerphone?
I can. What's your name?
JoJo.
JoJo. All right. I wasn't sure because another of our colleagues has a number similar to that.
Hey, let me talk about this oil stuff real quick before you run out of time.
Okay.
Of course, I live in what we call the oil patch. And I realize everybody else in the United States don't live in the oil patch, so it doesn't bother them as much as it bothers me. But you can read all that hype, you can read all Bloomberg, you can read every damn thing you want to, but here it is in basic economics. It costs you $75 to get oil out of a hole. You can't keep drilling. You can't keep running a rig for $50, $60. It's not going to happen. They might can do it for a month. They cannot do it long term. That's basic economics. If you were running a restaurant and your business was down 40% since June, which is, oil has gone down 40% since June, and you were running a steakhouse, well, how long do you think you could keep cooking $12 steaks when your business is down 40%? Not too long. That's just
not at all.
Economics. And why do these people think that this is going to be wonderful for American energy? First of all, I want to tell people they need to back up and, look this thing over good. We're not taking OPEC down. OPEC is trying to take us down. This is not going to be wonderful for American energy. This is not going to produce American energy independence. Maybe 10 years from now, maybe. But what is the people in my state in Louisiana going to do for the next 10 years? We're supposed to just go, you go tits up and then 10 years from now start all over. It just don't work that way. In 1986, which I remember very, very well, our whole economy went down the tubes. It took us 10 years to recover. 10 years.
Before we
so wait,
start
you have any questions? Because I happen to have an oil expert sitting right here with me. You got any questions that maybe I can't answer? He can?
Actually, yes, I do. What is the lowest amount that they can come? I know you said $70-something, but what is the lowest amount that the oil companies can actually turn a profit, keep going, and provide a lower price gas, lower than the $4 we've been paying for now years?
It's going to depend on the size of the rig. We got small rigs and big rigs. Small rigs can do it for a lower price. Of course, they don't have the overhead. We have a lot of overhead. People don't realize the cost of hydraulic fluid and drill bits and
what would be like a medium range? That would it be $70 a barrel, $60 a barrel? Because it's 58 right now today.
It's hard to say because the average well right now varies from depth to straight holes to horizontal holes. If you once you go horizontal, then you have to take into factor of the extra expertise and money to drill horizontal and to produce it. The average cost per barrel on a return has to be higher. If you're just gonna punch a straight little hole and let it come out of the ground, they could go back to living on cheaper oil. But if you let the oil prices get down below what the feasible to bring it out of the ground, then they're just going to shut them in, and then you're going to start laying people off. And so the people overseas,
then we'll have shortages of oil, and
the people
OPEC will be the
overseas,
big man on campus again.
Well, the people overseas, they don't care what it goes down to. They got that oil. They get $10 a barrel. They make money because compared to anything. So they don't have the cost. It's flowing out of the ground over there in the Middle East.
Yeah. I understand that.
And you got to factor like these big rigs. Now, these big rigs, remember what I told you last week? They're paying the bank $10 a barrel. Their outlay cost to the bank, whether it's interest, loans, whatever it is an average of $10 a barrel. And here's the other thing. If it's running 59 or 60 today, that doesn't mean my oil producers here in my parish are getting that. They're getting about $6 less. Brent crude's one price is what they actually get. So if it's 60, they're getting about 53. That's what they're operating on. You know, they don't operate on the cost of Brent crude. But, so anyway, you know, I've heard of 4 big rigs laying up at the yard just today. 2 from one company and 2 from another company. And those are the big ones. We're not talking about these little shallow wells. We're talking about the big rigs. They're bringing them into the yards right now, and we call it stacking them, which means they're just taking them off location and bringing them in, stacking them up in the yards.
Well, you know, Obama's slick. He wanted to kill oil and he wanted to kill coal. And he doesn't have anything to replace it with. So that's putting us at the mercy of overseas companies if we're not going to be allowing it here. And like your friend just said about what's going on overseas, those companies are owned by the government. They're not paying union wages and things like that. They don't have to. You know, they're not covering everybody's out. Yeah, you know. I mean, they don't have the overhead and the expenses and the permitting because they're the government. They don't have to pay for all that stuff.
Well, they've been paying 35 cents a gallon for gas, too. And, you know, they make money at $10 a barrel. We don't make money till, you know, I don't know what the cost is. I've had some small guys, little local small well guys tell me they can survive at 50. These big, huge rigs can't survive at 50. It's way too much technology and too much overhead and the cost of drilling.
You know, all these inflated prices that we're paying $4 a gallon for. And then we got these deflated prices that they're paying $2 a gallon for. If we all put our heads together, we can come up with a reasonable thing where, well, you know, the companies can make money and the people can save money. And like I just explained at the beginning of the show, too, Obama's already talking about putting on a higher gas tax because the government is losing revenue with the lower gas price.
Well,
but you think when that price goes back up, the government's going to cut that?
Yeah, it don't matter if the oil man loses money, but the government can't lose money. So even if it's supposed to be $1.79 a gallon, he'll keep it at $2.20. He'll just add more taxes.
Exactly.
That's what they've always done.
And then when the price goes back up to $4, you don't think he's going to cut back on it? Just like with cigarettes in New York. You know, they had $6 a pack as a tax, supposedly to stop people from smoking, but it didn't do that. They just got $6 a pack more in taxes, and they're not cutting it back. No, they got used to that money, and the government got used to the gas tax money, and now they want to raise it again. So it doesn't matter if they're paying $58 a barrel.
All these people that are saving $100, $150 a month in gas prices, they're not saving anything because everything else is still going up. So, I mean, sure, it's nice. I enjoy paying $2.37 a gallon too. I enjoy the heck out of it. But I also
you know, that's the part that's heartbreaking, JoJo, is because all these people that are suffering. I know my daughter works 40 miles away, and it's costing her at least $40 a day in gas. So times 5, that's $200 a week in gas. You know how much money you think they're paying her? And she's still got her other bills and Obamacare.
I understand all that. I'm just saying, I mean, I understand if you live off somewhere, you know, and you don't live in the oil patch, it doesn't really concern you, but it'll shut down. I don't know how bad it's going to hurt South Louisiana, but I can tell you the northwest corner of Louisiana is, you know, our economy is based on 2 things. One is the oil patch and one is welfare. So we lose the oil patch. It ain't just the oil people that have royalties. You know, there's a lot of people that have little wells in their yard. Y'all don't understand. There's a well probably every half mile around here. You might have a well in your yard, and you may get 3 barrels a day or a week or whatever. Let's just say your royalty check is up $1,000 a month. All of a sudden now, and you've been getting that royalty check for years, so that's part of your budget. All of a sudden now, your royalty check's $200. Well, that's, you know, you're out. You know, you got to figure out where the heck you're going to get some money to pay your bills. Now, this one guy locally, this guy, I know, I'm not going to say his name. He's gone in the last couple of months from $2 billion to $400,000 in royalties. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of difference.
Yeah, now, see, people will think that number, $2 billion, oh, well, he's making $2 billion. The company is making $2 billion, but then he's got his shareholders, and he's got his help, and he's got his overhead, and it ends up being an 8% profit, if that. And you're still going to split that with the shareholders.
It was $2 million, not billion. I misspoke. But whatever, it's a 40% drop. a 40% drop, 40%. I don't care if it's 1,000 or 100,000. You're losing 40%. And then our Walmart, they're losing. The Dollar Store, today there are some people at Walmart. Yesterday there was nobody nowhere. Every store in this town ain't doing nothing for business. Everybody's just sitting back, waiting, nervous, twiddling their thumbs. So,
ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing it. You're hearing it from small town America. This is what these communities thrive on and live on and build their communities around. And there's little stores and hotels and homes and everything around these wells, too. When those wells go out, it doesn't just affect the oil company. It affects the entire town, as our colleague here is explaining
But
to
the
us.
whole point I'm trying to make, let me just back up and put this in a big thing. There's a lot of people that are hollering, woo-hoo, this is great, drill, baby, drill. They don't understand. There ain't going to be no drill, baby, drilling, because if they can't pay to get it out of the ground, they're not going to be drilling. So there you go. And OPEC's trying to take us down. It's not the other way around. I wouldn't mind seeing OPEC down too, but, it's not going to be a pretty sight.
Or Maxine Waters might get her own way and say, well, we're just going to socialize your industry.
Well, I don't know. All right, well, I'm going to let you go. I just wanted to give you my full update.
Well, thank you very, very much, JoJo, and JoJo's guest. Thank you for bringing on an expert for us. We appreciate that.
All right. Talk to y'all later.
Thank you. All right. You want to take a break, Scott?
Sure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we got a bunch more stuff to get to, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So stick around. We'll be right there.
You are listening to Freedomizer Radio, where freedomizers freedomize freedom.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sticking around. We appreciate it. You're listening to Zone 13 with myself, Joanne Moretti, and my great co-host, Scott Ferrarello. And like I said, we're happy you stuck around. When we left off, we just had a guest colleague, JoJo, and her expert witness. And, that's what we were trying to explain earlier, that there's always another side to the story. And I think that we could come up with a happy medium. But I got a problem. If you're going to destroy oil and coal, you probably should have something to replace it with before you do this. That's also something to think about. So there is a medium that we can come to. We can still have affordable gas, and these companies can still make a profit and pay their help, and everybody will be fine. But what's happening right now is we are going to be at the mercy of OPEC, or even worse, the energy business is going to be taken over by the United States government, just like Obamacare. It's going to be oil care, or whatever they're going to call it. Got anything to say on that, Scott?
Well, I don't know. I think it's more aimed toward Russia. But, like I said, if the U.S. had the same drilling permits of crude oil instead of all this shale fracking nonsense, there wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, but they're not going to give them the permit.
No, I know, but Obama cut that like about 80%.
Right. And then
so
the guy just told us that
this is a manufactured crisis by our government once again.
Mhm.
I mean,
yeah, the guy told us the horizontal drilling is more expensive than poking a hole in the ground, but you're not going to get a permit to poke a hole.
They found more oil in Texas alone than the entire country of Saudi Arabia in the last 5 years, okay? And this
right.
10 years ago, you had mega liar billionaires like T. Boone Pickens saying we were going to run out of oil. We could sustain ourselves for 1,000 years if we wanted to, if we had a government that actually cared about this country.
Yeah, but they don't, Scott. It's all about the power and the money. Always follow the money. We got a lot of work to do, America. Speaking of work to do, the IMF reform did not go through, and Lagarde is flipping out. She wanted this, and our other colleague, Carol, has been saying this for so long. But now, in January, Lagarde's going to make another attack on it. She has a work plan for 2015. So I don't know. This is going to get really, really ugly.
You know,
Yeah,
people
this is
are
going to
sick.
get ugly.
People are sick of the Rothschild banking scheme, and they've turned on it. And it's all just a pivot to another banking scheme of BRICS, created by Goldman Sachs.
Right.
And so just another group of oligarchs, become, monopolize the world's money.
And again, it comes back to power and money.
That's right.
It's always power and money. They don't hear us. They don't even see us or consider us. We're the stupid people that Gruber was talking about that were so easy to get over on. They could tell us anything. Hey,
this UN thing too. Once the dollar is no longer the world's currency, and it's China, which they're talking about already, by the way, since you brought up Carol. They're going to take away the U.S.'s veto power. They're not going to need the United States' money anymore to operate because they're going to have China's money and Russia's money. And then they're going to come out with a cashless society. And they're going to say you either get, this United Nations Global World Currency Fund credit card, or you don't buy or sell anything, period.
That's right. You're right. He's right about this, ladies and gentlemen. Also, there's an article here from Reuters, and it says Obama says to keep pressing China on currency. Obama's not pressing China on anything. China's pressing Obama. I mean, you all saw him capitulate. You all saw that last visit up there.
He's over there kissing their hiney and dressing up like Chairman Mao, having a good time.
Yeah, he's over there at a pajama party. We are running out of time, but I just want to tell everybody that 24 states are now suing Obama, and this is on the immigration. We talked about earlier that he doesn't have the authority, but they've transferred the whole immigration system to the DHS, which is illegal. So there's a problem with that in 24 states, including Texas and Florida, by the way. There's a bunch of them. You got any closing comments for our guests?
Yeah, that last story is actually some good news. We need a couple more states to jump on board,
Yeah, well, 24 is good. It's almost half, so we'll see about the other half. A lot of them won't come on, but that's enough, especially if you got Pam Bondi and you got Greg Abbott behind it. He's going to be the governor in Texas, but he's still the attorney general until January. However, he was one of the first to bring that up. All right, we're going to have to say good day to everybody. Any closing comments, my friend?
Nope, I'm good to go.
All right, well, then I should just say bye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today, and we hope you enjoy our show. To all of our listeners and callers and all the cool people in the chat rooms, thank you so very much. Anna, Lynn, AstroTurf, thank you very much. Great job. And thank you to our special correspondent, JoJo, and her guest. As always, a very special thank you to my great co-host, Scott Ferrarello. So on that note, good night, America. We will see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. That's noon Pacific. And Zone 13 out. Hello, Freedomizers. Joanne Moretti here, inviting you to join my great co-host Scott Ferrarello and myself, as well as our many correspondents and colleagues, every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's noon Pacific, for Zone 13, the best fast-paced news, current events, and investigative report show on the web. We bring you the news the mainstream media won't. Please find us at freedomizerradio.com, where you can listen and chat. Again, please join us for Zone 13, Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. Hope to see you there, Freedomizers.